One 37-hour flight from Missouri to Iran. B-2 bombers dropped 30,000-pound bunker busters on nuclear facilities throughout Iran. Were they successful? Did it accomplish its goal? Did we destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities? Pilots in the air for almost 40 hours with toilets, snacks, and a cooler. Begin or end this war with Iran. 2, best case, worst case, most likely scenarios for this burgeoning war with Iran with Erik Prince. 3, they're loaded for bear. Is it the beginning of a dynasty with their first title in Oklahoma City? It is Will Cain Country, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Terrestrial radio, 3 dozen markets across the great United States of America, but always on demand by subscribing at Apple or on Spotify. Or set a reminder at YouTube, on Facebook, and join us at 12 o'clock Eastern Time every Monday through Thursday. What a weekend of events. What a weekend. What a Saturday night. When perhaps you were having dinner with friends or family. Perhaps you're relaxing. Perhaps you had a movie on. I was at a futsal game with my wife and son. At the end, as we gathered for burgers, I heard the news, which you might have seen on the Fox News channel. If you saw President Trump come out around 8:05 Eastern Time and say the following.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue.
On Saturday night, B-2 bombers departed Missouri, headed west towards Guam in what ended up being a distraction and diversion. Instead, a package of B-2 bombers, refueling tankers, fighter jets, departed to the east on a 37-hour flight. 7 B-2 bombers, fighter jets, refueling airplanes, surveillance aircraft, 75 precision-guided weapons, 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles were launched from a submarine off the coast of Iran to hit facilities in Isfahan. Meanwhile, those B-2 bombers were headed for Natanz and Fordo, the deep-buried nuclear facilities inside the mountain in Iran. 14 MOPs, massive ordnance penetrators, also known as bunker busters, were dropped on nuclear targets in the area, each bomb weighing 15 tons. Details suggest that it was somewhat like out of Top Gun Maverick, or before that, Star Wars, that these precision-guided bombs found ventilation shafts at Fordo, dropping their explosive capacity deeper into the mountain. There are questions today about exactly how much damage was done to centrifuges, to uranium stockpiles. Iran reportedly has uranium stockpiles enriched to 60%, 90%, the necessary number to make a nuclear bomb. Were all of those uranium stockpiles there at Natanz, at Fordo, or were they scattered? Were they evacuated ahead of time? The New York Post has a photo up today of trucks lined up outside the Fordo facility in the hours leading up to the bombing. What were those trucks doing? It's going to take surveillance. It's going to take intelligence, most likely from Israeli Mossad, to find out the extent of the damage done in this initial bombing campaign, a campaign which began on June 21st at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time. That's when the B-25s left Whitman Air Force Base in Missouri. 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time, June 21st. By 6 p.m., they had arrived after crossing the Atlantic, linking up with refueling tankers somewhere in Europe, picking up escorts along the way. At 6:05 p.m. Eastern time, 18 hours later, they arrived for a 1 hour, roughly 45 minutes to 1 hour strike window, dropping these massive bombs onto Fordo and Natanz. Those B-2 bombers exited Iranian airspace not long after, returned home roughly 37 hours later. Zero casualties, zero American casualties. As described by President Trump, a complete and utter success. The next morning, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, along with Joint Chief Commander Dan Raisin Cain, gave their overview of what's being described as an absolutely successful mission.
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Now the world waits. What will be the response of Iran? There have been initial missile launch attacks on Israel, nothing yet on American bases. But it's been made clear if one American is killed, if one American is hurt, it will be an absolute devastation, suicidal devastation for Iran. It should be noted that there is a terror warning from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem at the homeland here in the United States. Could Iran activate a sleeper cell here at home? We thought it interesting to look this up. 1,504 Iranian nationals have been caught by Border Patrol during the Biden administration. Half of those 1,500 Iranian nationals were released into the United States. Here's what it looks like year by year. Iranian nationals caught at the border, southern border, by Border Patrol. In fiscal year 21, 48. 22, 197. 23, 462. 24, 797. Each year, roughly half that had been released into the United States to be marked as someone who has a special interest alien designation, supposedly then subjected to greater vetting by DHS. If you'll remember, there was a video of an Iranian national caught at the southern border over the Biden administration who said, "You will soon know my name." I don't think we should indulge in too much fear-mongering, but there's vigilance that's important, an acknowledgement of potential threats. This is something that has to be paid attention to because of what's happened to our country over the last 5 years at the southern border. What is the power of Iran in the region? Well, we know they have ballistic missile capabilities, and we have tons of American soldiers and bases within striking range of Iran. Iran's response has been fairly flaccid so far towards Israel, and certainly nothing towards the United States. Is that a reflection of how much of their capabilities have been degraded by the Israelis, who've continued their attacks today, targeting Iranian Revolutionary Guard troops and facilities and missile capabilities? But still some remains. And what remains of that uranium? Is there much left? What would it take? I've asked and wondered why there's not radiation after a successful bombing campaign. Apparently the answer is when uranium is only enriched to 60%, it's not yet capable of a chain reaction. It's not yet obviously weaponized, and it wouldn't therefore create massive fallout. But I wonder if it wasn't all gotten, where else could it be taken in Iran? What else could be done with it? How quickly could it be weaponized? Could it even create a dirty bomb? If they don't have the missile capabilities to deliver a nuclear weapon, or not yet, what do they have the capability of doing with sleeper cells and terrorists across the country? These are all questions that have to be asked today. You have to be asking these questions, as well as asking what President Trump means when he put out on Truth Social the following last night about our goals in Iran. President Trump posted, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA, M-I-G-A, make Iran great again." That today has much of the right completely divided. This is, of course, something that they thought they voted for. No more forever wars, no more regime changes, no more building democracies, no more nation building across the Middle East. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what President Trump is saying. He could be calling for a revolution in the streets. He could be calling for a regime change from the domestic population of Iran. He's not saying America is committed to the same projects that we failed at in Libya and Iraq. Over the course of this week on this program and the Will Cain Show on the Fox News Channel, I'll be talking about some of that regime change. I think it's important to understand the context. Last week, we talked about the domestic population in Iran. It's 98.5% Muslim, the overwhelming majority of that Shia Muslim, as opposed to the rest of the Arab world, which is Sunni Muslim. The ethnic diversity of Iran is largely 60% Persian. There are ethnic minorities, Turkic, and many others that make up the rest of the population. The reason that matters is when you embark on a project of regime change, you never know what you unleash when you pull the top off something. We pulled the top off Iraq, and what did we get? Civil war, sectarian violence. Iraq, though, a much more diverse nation than Iran. We pull the top off in Libya, killing Muammar Gaddafi, and what do we unleash? Chaos, a place where terror finds home to breed. Huge humanitarian crises in Iraq and Libya, in Syria, pushing refugees into Europe, creating breeding grounds for terrorism. All of that has to be considered when you consider a regime change in Iran, whether it is one driven by the United States or driven by the local population. But analogies are useful, but history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. You hope you learn the lessons. You ask yourself the hard questions. You see what will happen in Iran. It doesn't mean it's the same thing that happened in Iraq or Libya, but it certainly doesn't mean that you did ignore the failed experiments of not just Iraq, not just Syria, not just Libya, but Afghanistan. We'd be totally ignorant, idiots, not to learn the lessons of the last 2 decades. But we've got much more pressing and immediate matters when it comes to Iran, our own personal domestic security and what they can do and what they will do in response and what that predicates from the United States. And then that brings us to best, worst, and most likely scenarios. Let's get into that now with story number 1. What's the most likely scenario? What's the best we can hope for in Iraq? Well, you ask, as so far as laid out our goals, which is to set back Iran's nuclear capabilities, how far did we accomplish it? Was it months? Was it years? The best case scenario from a United States perspective, and really the only perspective that matters for us as Americans, is that this execution of limited strikes, successful strikes, set back this nuclear infrastructure, and Iran does not respond irrationally in some broader regional conflict. We get some type of diplomatic advantage, leverage, and avoid long-term war. What's the worst case? Well, we get pulled into a regional quagmire. Bases are attacked. U.S. bases are attacked. Ships targeted. Troops killed. By the way, Russia and China are then emboldened. Disturbing post from Russia over the last couple of days. Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Russia, posted on X. What have the Americans accomplished with their nighttime strikes on 3 nuclear sites in Iran? 1, critical infrastructure of nuclear fuel cycle appears to be unaffected and sustained only minor damage. 2, the enrichment of nuclear material, and now we can say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons will continue. 3, a number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. That's incredibly disturbing. Will Russia step up? Will China step up? Who will help Iran if their stockpiles are depleted? That certainly falls under a worst-case scenario. Maybe most likely, we continue more precision strikes, more covert ops. We avoid a ground war. We in the American public are publicly divided. Inflation goes up, probably. We start to talk about elections. Seems to be the normal course of business in most of these things. That kind of goes the same for the Iranian government, the Iranian people. The most likely case is they're going to face increased hardship. The Iranian people haven't stood up. They have not yet. How weakened is the Iranian government? How influenced are they by their past failed attempts at revolution in Iran? What could change their population? Do they have full information flow? Do they know what's going on? Do we have full information flow? Do we know what's going on? It's hard to know exactly how these scenarios will play out for the Iranians, for the Iranian government, for the Israelis, for the Israeli government, for the U.S., for the United States government, because it's just getting started. But let's figure it out, because in order to know where it's headed, we have to know what was just accomplished. How far did we get? In what is described as a complete success, how far did we get in accomplishing our stated goal at the moment, which is setting back Iran's nuclear ambitions? Let's break down, where are we? And then therefore, what is most likely? Best case, worst case. Coming up with Erik Prince on Cain Country. What's next? For Iran and the United States, it is Cain Country, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Erik Prince is here to help us answer that question. He's the founder of the Unplugged phone at unplugged.com. He's also the host of Off the Leash with Erik Prince, the author of Civilian Wars, and also the founder of Blackwater. Erik, it's great to see you again, man. What do you think of what we're hearing about what happened over the weekend? Would you describe it right now as a success?
Well, I was on Steve Bannon's show before it happened, saying I don't think it's a good idea, and I still don't think it's a good idea. I think the complexities that will unfold now will cause more problems for the United States. For the Israelis, they've been thinking about this nuclear problem for a long time, and it doesn't require a B-2 bomber to solve that problem. And for as many problems as the United States had with the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandab, with the Houthis closing that waterway off, using Iranian weapons, trust me, the IRGC, the Iranian military has stockpiled probably 10 times as many weapons as the Houthis had to be able to shut off the Straits of Hormuz. And that's 20% of the world's oil supply. If they do that, or if they do that for everyone except the oil going to the Chinese, because certainly the Iranians don't want to hurt their allies, the Chinese Communist Party, it will still cause massive disruptions and massive price spikes in the world oil market. And it will cause, if you get to $100, $110 a barrel in the U.S. market, imagine that effect on our economy and recession and all the rest. So this is where the linkage of economy and military affairs very much intersects. And again, it's one I would not have, I counseled against it, but they appeared to strike those nuclear facilities, or what were nuclear facilities. But again, the Iranians are very deliberate, clever people. I would find them to be completely idiotic if they kept all their stuff, all their eggs in one basket, as an easy target for the U.S. to hit. I'd be surprised if all their stuff was at those nuclear sites. Honestly, Will, the only time air power alone has ever won a battle, ever ended a war, was Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nuclear weapons. Otherwise, the all air power, airstrike, precision, all the rest is largely hope. And again, that's a war in Iran is not something the United States government, the United States citizens should be dragged into.
All right, you said a lot that I want to follow up on right there. Let's start with shutting down the Straits of Hormuz. And you talked about the Iranian missile stockpiles are much greater than the Houthis. What is your guess, or what is your knowledge about how much the Israelis have been able to deplete, or the Iranians have depleted themselves by already firing their missile capabilities? I mean, I'd be curious what you think about what the Iranians have done so far in terms of their response. Most people are saying it's a lot less than they expected, and that brings the question up as to why. Have they already been depleted? So is their ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz also deteriorated?
Look, insurance companies are chickens. And if one oil hauling ship is damaged by a mine, a missile, or a drone, they're going to shut off. They're going to withhold coverage. And it's going to cause all kinds of problems percolating from that. I don't think the Israelis have gone anywhere near to destroying all the Iranian missile capability or all the drone capability. and their ability to launch wave after wave. Look at what happened in the Red Sea when you had a $30,000 drone like the Shahed 136 launched against U.S. naval vessels where they had to fire not one, but two $1 million missiles to shoot that thing down. Do that thousands of times, which is what will happen in the Straits of Hormuz against any number of the thousands of vessels per month that roll through there. That becomes an impossibly difficult logistics challenge.
Okay, you also said were nuclear facilities. You said where they have nuclear facilities, and then you corrected yourself to say where there were nuclear facilities. Are you concerned, highly concerned, that in fact they had gotten most of that uranium? I heard you. It's probably dispersed. It would be idiotic to have all of your eggs in one basket, but they knew this was coming and might have even moved everything ahead of time?
Look, all I know is I look back at history, and whenever anybody thinks that they're going to hit some key strategic spot and knock out the enemy's capability, the fact is, for all the bombs, the millions of tons of bombs that we dropped on Germany during World War II, we never really affected aircraft production. Okay, the Messerschmitt 109 was produced at the same volume in 1945 as it was in 1942 because they just took the machinery out of the factories and put them in tunnels in the sides of hills. So the Iranians have had a long time to think about this problem. I would be shocked if they haven't come up with a dispersed strategy to do the same. So it's dangerous for us to assume that it's a one and done. Hey, it's way too much of our American way to expect a simple, clean solution to something as complex and ancient as the Persian Empire.
You also said, Eric, that it wasn't necessary for the United States. You didn't need B-2 bombers, that the Israelis could have done it themselves. That's different than everything we were told ahead of this, that only we had the military capability, only we had these massive ordnance penetrators, only we had the delivery vehicles in the B-2. So how could it have been handled by the Israelis?
Sure. I know for a fact, because I've seen enough videos of some very large ANFO, ammonium nitrate bombs going off over parts of Iran, that the Israelis are flying at least C-130 aircraft over the battle space. Now, a C-130 will carry 20 tons. If you want to carry 50 to 70 tons, you can rent some bigger ramped cargo aircraft or buy. They cost between $5 up to $10 million a piece. An ex-Soviet Air Force cargo plane, there's lots of them moving around Africa and the Middle East. And a massive ordnance penetrator bomb like they dropped is basically a machined out hardened steel rod. In many cases, they can use an gun, like a naval gun barrel, and you put fusing on there. And if the Israelis have been thinking about this problem set for the last 15 or 20 years, worried about an Iranian nuclear program, then they should have built that capability to deliver it by themselves. I dropped enough boats out of airplanes that weigh many, many tons to know it's not that hard to get a large device off an aircraft in a hurry, in a stable way, to deliver that kind of weapon system. No, it's not going to be a stealth bomber, but the fact is they have largely degraded the Iranian weapon systems, surface-to-air missile systems, to make it possible to deliver with that kind of precision. So yes, I believe the Israelis could have delivered it themselves if they needed to.
Okay, and yet now we have. And so that brings the question of what the Iranians will do beyond maybe even just attacking and shutting down the Straits of Hormuz. Are you concerned, Eric, with any threats to domestic homeland? I mean, there are a lot of Iranian nationals who have illegally immigrated to this country over the last 5 years. I don't know the capabilities of the IRGC, of the Iranians, to weaponize people across the world. How concerned are you for us back here at home?
We should be highly concerned because we've had such a porous border. Tens of thousands of Iranian nationals have gone to Venezuela, been rebadged as Venezuelans, and in many cases entered even legally into the United States with a Venezuelan passport over the last 2 decades. So their ability to have significant amounts of sleeper cells we should be concerned. And when you combine that with, when you look at some of the pro-Hezbollah, pro-Hamas marches going on in eastern Michigan, results of a completely runaway, out of control immigration system where you have a lot of fundamentally incompatible with the American way of life people that are sympathizing with the enemy, that is a huge internal problem. So yeah, we should be concerned, because if any one of those cells are activated, we have a very, very soft underbelly of a lot of very soft targets in America. And I'd be shocked if the Iranians don't respond.
Domestically, through that mechanism we
Yes.
just talked about, not just regionally, but domestically.
Domestically.
If you were wargaming that, Erik, and I don't want to indulge in fear mongering or reckless speculation, but if you and I were in a closed room with people that mattered, and you have been, and you were wargaming, what would the softest targets and how that would play out? We just saw the Israelis and the Ukrainians pull off big drone attacks domestically with people on the ground with pretty low-tech capabilities, from what I understand, in launching that type of attack in Russia, in Iran. You have our history here. There's bombs, there's guns. It's easy to have guns in the United States. What would be what would you be wargaming?
Look, something as simple as driving a vehicle up on a curb and mowing down shoppers. I mean, if you want to weaponize things, if you have the mind devious enough for it, there's a lot of ways you can hurt innocent people. And we have a very open, free society, which is what we want. But that means you actually have to know who belongs in the country and who doesn't, which is something we've lost the plot on. And I'd say we're behind on deporting all the people we should be, despite the best efforts of the Trump administration. So, kicking this hornet's nest, it's a very, very dangerous time to kick that nest. That's all I'm saying. And so we should be ready, mentally prepared for those consequences.
Okay, let's go back to history for a moment. I find it fascinating. I love how you always bring in historical precedent. No war has ever been won through air power alone, which
with the exception of
I was thinking through my mind.
That's it.
With the exception of Japan. Where would you classify what NATO did in the 90s in Yugoslavia? That was largely just an air campaign, right? And I'm forgetting his name at the moment, but I mean, he was deposed at the end of that NATO air campaign.
Slobodan Milosevic.
Yes. And what do you take from that history?
The fact is they still had significant ground combat systems. At the end of the day, that leadership lost its nerve. What I know, what the Serbian special forces had actually planned and prepared for, the leadership lost their nerve, but they'd actually smuggled trucks into Europe with Grad rockets on board to attack legitimate military targets of the military headquarters of NATO, Germany, France, the Netherlands, with 122 millimeter rocket attacks. So there was a lot of fight. I mean, NATO literally dodged a bullet by Milosevic blinking. That was a lack of will on the leadership side, not of the manpower. And I would say when you mix radical Shia Islam in with the mullah regime and their desire for martyrdom, it's a very, very volatile mix. And so we have to be prepared for that and think about how many people are willing to do any kind of suicide bombing or suicide activity to serve their cause.
And do you think, Erik, that almost that Yugoslavian Milosevic model is the hope behind the doors in Washington, that through this campaign, both Israeli and now American, that somewhere along the line here, the Iranian leadership blinks, they flee, they get on a plane to Russia, something like that? Is that what you think they're hoping? And then therefore, then you can have the domestic revolution, the people stepping up?
I don't think hope is an acceptable policy. If you're gonna commit the resources of the United States to an outcome, hope is not part of it. I see Reza Pahlavi, right, the deposed crown prince, hasn't really done anything for the last 46 years now having a press conference saying, okay, Iran, time to rise up and revolt, until there's organization. Look, the mullahs are not liked. The fact that Israel could pull off so much inside of Iran means they have lots of very willing participants to rise up against the regime. But I would have, instead of a campaign of bombing that the Israelis started, that the United States joined, we should have, and what I've publicly advocated for years, was something akin to what the U.S., the CIA, and the Catholic Church did to the communists in Poland in the 1980s, empowering all the different alternate centers of power, the students, the refinery workers, the truckers, the teachers, the environmentalists, the rock and roll clubs, all those alternate centers of power, on top of the ethnic disparities between the Baluch, the Akwazis, the Kurds, the Azeris, all of them that don't like the mullahs, which are largely Persians, to rise up and resist the regime. And we've been close before, missed a huge opportunity in 3 years ago when you had the Women Life Freedom protests going on, when you had millions of women in the streets protesting against the horrible treatment of women. That's the time to provide them just a little bit of kinetic help, but the Biden administration completely missed that. And I would have not have counseled for the B2 being the solution, but rather that kind of low-level pressure and power. In the case of ending the Cold War, it was communications gear and not even kinetics, which finally tipped over those communist states in Eastern Europe. So a missed opportunity. I don't know that Pahlavi, as the son of the deposed Shah, is the solution. He's probably the most recognized or semi-trusted, but he hasn't really done anything to actually and physically promote the freedom, the solidarity, and the liberation of his country yet.
Okay, let's do this for a moment. So President Trump tweeted last night or posted on Truth Social, "Make Iran great again," talking about regime change. Now, whatever he means by that, by the way, he's played a lot of poker openly and publicly over the past couple of weeks, said some things, done something else. Strategic poker, I would assume. So I don't know what exactly he's calling for there. He could be calling for the people to rise up. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean we're embarking on the same thing that we did in Iraq or Afghanistan. But I'm curious if the regime were toppled. And you know what? Even with the scenario you described, or maybe even more concerning, should we have pursued the path you described, if you foment domestic divisions, ethnic, religious, whatever it may be, then you have this situation that you might have the situation we did have in Iraq, which is civil war, sectarian violence immediately afterwards.
Or what you have in Libya right now.
Right.
Still.
So I wonder what you think, and by the way, Syria as well. So what you might think would happen in Iran. I mean, if the mullahs were toppled, I mean, it's different ethnically. 60% is a huge majority Persian, 60% Persian. And you don't seem to have the...
That's not correct. Persians are...
Meaning that's not a huge majority?
They're about 40%.
I thought it was 60. Okay. All right.
Oh, sir.
But how about this? Okay, so let's bear down on this, but not the same sectarian divide, right? Almost all of it Shia Muslim.
Almost all Shia, with a shockingly larger than you think and fast-growing minority, which is Christian.
Okay, so do you feel like now that you've repositioned me to 40% Persian? Do you feel like Iran would be similarly unstable as we've seen in these other countries like Iraq and Libya?
Certainly high risk of that. I'd say the group to work with the most closely with is the Iranian military, because the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, is the enforcer of the mullahs right now. They very much behave and are like the SS was to the Nazi party in Germany. The Schutzstaffel, the protectors. And the IRGC is who makes all the money from all the sanctions and all the special perks. The Iranian army is a significant force. And I think I almost have to look at it like dropping a rotten tree. You want to be really careful. And you can never be exactly sure how it's going to come down, but you try to guide it. And if you have an Iranian military that you've recruited, paid, provided some capability for to smash the IRGC, the rest of the regime goes away. The regime was in such bad shape back in 2009 and 10, which is actually where the Arab Spring started in 2009
Right.
with the green protests in Iran. And it was so bad,
Right.
the regime was in such dangerous shape there that they actually brought in Lebanese Hezbollah to crack down because they didn't trust any of the internal Iranian resources. So the regime is fragile. Empowering some of the ethnic groups or some commando element and some part of the Iranian military to turn on the IRGC, that's how they take this down internally. And I don't know if the
Now,
CIA
is that still
is part of that. I don't know if the Israelis have supercharged that capability. You'd think they'd be showing themselves now
right?
if they had, but I don't think an air campaign alone is going to make is going to drop this problem.
Okay, so what you're laying out for us, though, is an air campaign combined with hoping one of these elements stands up. Interesting about the Iranian military. Hoping one of these elements stands up domestically to take down the mullahs.
Yeah, but I would have hoped if they're planning on doing this air campaign to weaken the regime, that you have to have a ground element to actually hold ground. Air campaigns don't work unilaterally for almost anything.
But so this is. What do you mean by ground element? Everyone listening is going to be concerned about American troops committed to anything like this. Israeli troops, I don't know.
Oh God!
Are you talking about domestic?
Domestic? Hard no.
I know you're not. I know you're not advocating. No. I know you're not advocating. We're analyzing. No, I know you're not advocating. Analyzing here. I know you're not. I know, but if it has to have a ground element, and you're doing this war planning game scenario out with us, is that you're saying that ground element is the domestic uprising, right? It is that element that stands up domestically.
That should have been prepared for months ago. You take people out, you recruit them, you train them, you send them back in with certain arms caches, so you have the ability to communicate and organize and move by 50 and 100 man groups to be able to seize certain terrain, to make things happen. It is the unconventional warfare approach. That's what U.S. Army Special Forces do. And again, not advocating any active U.S. personnel in any way to do that. But whoever planned this campaign to get rid of the mullahs, if they didn't plan that kind of ground combat element using local partisan forces, they are clearly missing the history of regime changes.
Okay, well, then does that lead you to believe that's actually not been the goal from the beginning? I've always wondered if that was an inevitable goal, like you couldn't avoid that. Is it, do you take them at their word that the goal is simply to rewind the clock? I don't know, months, years on the nuclear campaign?
I don't know, Will. I would that's pure speculation if I said anything on that. So I don't know.
On the goal side of this.
Yep.
What do you think President Trump means when he posts that on Truth Social?
I think he listens to a lot of what the Israelis are calling for. I have Middle East fatigue, and Israelis' problems are not our problems, and that's dragging us into a bigger problem. Because I don't think a one and done B-2 raid on 3 nuclear facilities will be the last time U.S. troops are called on now for this, and that's my objection to this. If people are hell-bent to do regime change, then do a proper job of planning of a commando, indigenous, partisan ground element to put that kind of pressure at the ground level, at the boot-on-neck level against the IRGC and the Quds Force and the Basij, and let the Iranian people, the citizens that live there, rise up and reclaim their freedom. This ultimately has to be their mission that's accomplished. It cannot be done by U.S. intervention or by Israeli intervention. They have to, look, the French helped us gain our independence, but it was ultimately U.S. boots and leadership that made it happen.
Okay, I think I have two more follow-ups.
1781.
The Israelis are not stupid. That has been well illustrated. And their capabilities inside Iran, as you talked about earlier, are pretty sophisticated. Think of this now, Eric, if you would, from the Israeli side. If the Israelis, and they've been pretty open about their desire for regime change, if that is their desire, would you not think they had a plan like you just described to stand up domestic elements if it needs a ground element? But even if the alternative is, part of it is we're going to get the United States involved, there has to be some understanding that's not going to, I don't know, that it's not going to involve boots on the ground, full-out warfare for the United States in Iran. I'm wondering what the Israeli, forget the American plan. What was the Israeli plan?
That's a damn good question. I don't know. And maybe their plan was to make enough of a stink in Washington to pressure the President Trump into backing them up. Look, they're the ones that started bombing Iran, what was it, 2 weeks ago? And that's a country 11 times their population, with a very dispersed geography, with significant oil resources and money that they've invested into tens of thousands of low-cost precision weapons that in some cases have made it through the 5 layers of air defenses to smash into Israeli cities. If it was the Israeli plan all along to drag America into this, that's really bad. That is not being an ally. And I am in favor of allies, but I am not in favor of America, of all this American protectorate stuff, where we are $37 trillion in debt. We're moving towards hyperinflation, where the cost of servicing our debt exceeds that of our defense budget. So these are very, very real economic problems that are born and imposed on all American citizens. But cleaning up the Iranian problem, the threat to Israel, is not the primary responsibility of the United States of America, period. And I am ornery that we're being dragged into this.
Okay, I think the last question or two here. You said this is not going to do it. What we have done, and you said you suspected this won't be it, what we've already done over the weekend. What do you think happens next involving the United States, Eric?
Well, now you wait and see what the enemy, what this opponent does. Do they close the Straits of Hormuz? Do they do a number of responses that are just below the obvious threshold of war? Or there are a bunch of lone wolf attacks? President Trump said, hey, this is a one and done. We're just destroying your nuclear capability. That's a big hope for them to say, okay, we just punched you, and now we're going to go home and don't punch us back. That's a big if.
Okay, and then finally, what do you want? Not from a week ago when you spoke to Bannon about what you hoped the outcome would be for the United States. The game has changed now, right? We've already launched this initial campaign. So from this point forward, what would you hope would happen with the United States?
That the United States would require our so-called ally to clean up the problem. The hornet's nest that they kicked over is not the burden of the U.S. Fighting personnel and not the burden of the U.S. taxpayer. You know, in the old Colin Powell phrase, you break it, you buy it. Not something we can afford to wade into is another endless nation-building war. No way.
So you're saying step back now and say, deal with it, Israel? The question is, to the point of your earlier answer, though, what do the Iranians do? If they don't see it that way, we don't have the capability of stepping back.
Well, it depends. If they retaliate and smash a bunch of U.S. bases and kill a bunch of Americans, yeah, this becomes a very ugly cycle that we could have avoided. And I think it's a very big bet of the president to say he can do this, clearly commit a precision bombing campaign. Apparently, no people were killed in these three attacks. That's good, but I would be shocked if we actually destroyed all their nuclear capability and their nuclear program. The fact is, the Iranians have uranium, and they haven't put anything on a dirty bomb yet. maybe that's something they pivot to. So there's a lot of ways they can escalate, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. I doubt they're at the point of fear where Khamenei and those around him are ready to abdicate and just run away. But maybe I'm wrong.
All right.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm completely wrong, and peace, love, and happiness breaks out in Tehran and the whole country, because a secular-run Iran with a very intelligent people that want to be part of the modern world with natural resources and lots of arable land, and like I said, a very smart population would be an amazing force of modernity and growth in the Middle East, and it would drag the whole region probably half a millennia forward. I hope that's the case, but I don't think that is the case.
Well, I found this depressing and enlightening, this conversation, Erik, which means I have to ask one last question. What do you think the response will be from the Russians and the Chinese?
Well, the Chinese import a huge amount of their oil from the Gulf. They passing through the Straits of Hormuz. So the last thing they want to do is interfere with that, because that becomes a massive threat to their economy. Putin just said something very interesting. He said 2 million of the people, of the citizens in Israel now speak Russian. They're Russian Jews that left. And so I don't see them retaliating or doing something aggressive. They have enough of their hands full in Ukraine, and hopefully find a way to get that wound down. Because that is in the United States' long-term interest, immediate interest and long-term, is to be not so antagonistic. We don't have to be best of friends, but at least a normal trading partner with Russia, and pull them out of the orbit of the Chinese Communist Party. So I don't see the Chinese taking any huge action, other than they will continue to trade with Iran. They will be the main economic lung that they breathe through. The Russians will, I'm sure, continue to buy stuff from Iran, some drones and drone components, because again, the Iranians have developed some unique capabilities that the Russians are putting to effective use in the Ukraine battle space. So I don't see any major response from either of them.
Okay. Like I said, concerning, maybe depressing, but also enlightening. Erik Prince, always love having you on the show. Thank you, Erik.
You bet, Will. Thanks.
Okay. Check out Erik at unplugged.com. That's the unplugged phone, or Off the Leash with Erik Prince. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we come back, the Oklahoma City Thunder are your NBA champions, but the future is always more interesting than the past. 13 first-round draft picks over the next 7 years. So, dynasty, coming up on Will Cain Country. Man, Erik Prince is not one to mince words or mess around, and unfortunately, right as he speaks, the news cycle follows. It is Will Cain Country, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. This just in from Axios. Iran launches missiles at U.S. military bases in Middle East. I'll read. Iran launched multiple missiles against American military bases in the Middle East on Monday in retaliation for the U.S. strike on its nuclear facilities this weekend, according to one Israeli official and one Arab official. 6 missiles were launched towards Qatar, the 2 officials said. 1 missile was launched toward Iraq, according to the Israeli official. The White House and the Department of Defense are aware of and closely monitoring potential threats to El Udeid Air Base in Qatar, a senior White House official told Axios. No news yet on what occurred with these missile strikes. Explosions were heard over Qatar's capital city of Doha Monday night local time, according to Reuters. No news here on whether or not these missiles were intercepted, found their home, caused any damage, caused any casualties. That certainly could, depending on the severity, change the state of play immediately. If our goal, that's the entire question, isn't it? What is our goal in Iran? That's it. That's the only question. What is our goal? Is our goal regime change? Is our goal to make the mullahs flee? Is our goal to depress their nuclear capabilities? Every single answer there to those different questions predicates a different response from the United States. If our goal is simply to set back their nuclear program and they feel compelled out of pride in response to offer up some face-saving measure, and if this, what I'm reading, is occurring as we speak, basically impotent, then can the United States go, okay, you did yours, we did ours, let's leave it. If an American is killed, that's completely different. But if our goal is regime change, then this is just a further obvious escalation. And then that brings into the conversation we just had with Erik Prince on how do you actually accomplish regime change? And what was the plan? None of this happened as a knee-jerk reaction. Not with the Americans, but certainly not with the Israelis. So that question I asked Erik Prince, what was the plan? What was the plan here for Israel? 2 days, Dan put up a poll for the Militia on YouTube and Facebook asking what, Dan?
So I put up a poll, was the U.S. right to bomb Iran's nuclear sites? And so we have about 3,500 votes in, and 74% say yes, the U.S. was right to do so, and 26% say no. So a little lopsided
75%.
there. Yep.
Right. I think the answer to that question, once again, goes back to a question. What was the goal?
Right.
What was the purpose of these strikes? If it was to set back their nuclear ambitions and nuclear program, rewind the clock months, if not years, well, then we have a series of questions. Did we accomplish it? How much did we destroy Fordo and Natanz? How much of the uranium that they had enriched to 60% was at Fordo or Natanz? How much do they have left? How much missile capability do they have? How much has that been degraded by Israel? What will be their response? Can they, as just mentioned by Erik Prince, fashion in fairly short time a dirty bomb? Will they activate sleeper cells here at home in the United States? If it was simply to degrade their nuclear capabilities, that would be nice if that's the end of the story. Success, mission accomplished. Was it success? Was the mission accomplished? What will the Iranians do? Because the story doesn't just get to the end, as everybody always says. The enemy has a vote. And what will be the vote of the enemy? And then we have to respond. That's why I couldn't answer that question, Dan. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I couldn't put myself in the 75 or 25. Now, in alternative, I think the most important question is not just what the goal of President Trump or America, but what was the goal of Israel? What was the plan? Israel's not stupid. They knew all of these things. They probably knew exactly what Erik Prince said. You cannot win. They have said very clearly their goal is regime change. Well, can you do that through an aerial campaign alone? And if it's not just going to be an aerial campaign, what is the ground warfare? Is it local? Is it domestic? Is it the military? Is it the women? Is it the students? Who is going to stand up in Iran? And was that planned for? And when will it happen? It hasn't happened yet. But if Erik is right, you have to have ground forces. When do we see that element of this entire plan play out? And if that wasn't the plan, and again, they're not stupid, so if they didn't put that into the plan, what was the plan and the alternative? And the alternative, was it for the United States to do so? I agree, that would be a problem. Because you put that poll out right now, and I guarantee it won't be 75-25. You want American troops in Iran? You want American troops trying to impose regime change in Iran? I guarantee you that number will not be 75-25. It just takes us back to these questions. And I respect American leadership's I to some extent, strategically, I respect the chess game of not laying out your goal and the answer to my questions publicly. But as a member of the American public, we all have a right to want to know as well that we're not sleepwalked into something, you know? We're not drug in slowly into something much bigger. Like, I would love to know the difference in polling on the American public, not just on these initial strikes. I'll bet you this, Dan. I'll bet you put out a poll not just with the militia, but any public polling. I don't care. Rasmussen, Trafalgar, Reuters, Gallup. You're probably going to get support for continued aerial bombing campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Zero casualties among Americans, whatever.
Yep.
Now, Erik talks about the Iranian response is going to dictate how we feel about this. If oil prices go up, inflation goes up, economy suffers, that's going to be a whole different deal. But my suspicion is that you're going to get a lot of American support for continued bombing. But once you change that equation to regime change, and if you don't have those domestic elements ready to do so, boy, I bet you see that poll flip. Another project like that, even if it has a higher probability of success than it did in Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, I think a lot of people have what Erik Prince said he just had, and that is fatigue of the Middle East.
Yeah,
all right.
I find it fascinating. There's 3 different ways I've seen to look at this. I mean, there's 1, we should have done what we did. 2, we shouldn't have done what we did because it's not America first. 3, we shouldn't have done what we did because we shouldn't be attacking Iran. And there's a lot of pro-Iran people that I've seen, which is pretty interesting lately.
Well, they don't factor into this equation. And I don't even know what you're talking about. I did see that there was some leftists on the streets of the U.S. You could laugh. Like, I've seen some memes about the Iranian flag has been raised apparently on some of these street protests.
Yeah,
I
New
guess the
York City.
Palestinian flag is now out of vogue, and that means the trans and pride flag is well into the distance. And my goodness, the Ukrainian flags are gathering dust in the garage. So
that's true. I don't mean to laugh.
Those people, I don't. They don't factor into the conversation. Now, there are people, by the way, on the right who I think are veering into some sympathy. There's no sympathy afforded to Iran. No sympathy afforded to Iran. Like, I don't want to hear about that stuff.
Yeah.
From right or left. It's only a matter of whether or not it helps America. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. End of story. Does it help America? All right, we'll continue this conversation. I think this news is going to continue day by day. I hope you'll hang out with us every day here at Cain Country. Let's quickly talk about Oklahoma City Thunder are your NBA champions. Somewhat entertaining game, at least through the first half last night before Tyrese Halliburton went out with a blown Achilles. At that point, the Pacers held for a while, actually led at the half, but eventually the firepower of the Oklahoma City Thunder was just too much. And by the way, their defense, incredible defense. But Chet Holmgren, Lou Dort, those guys can play defense. What's really, and everyone does this. This is the lead story on Get Up the day after a championship is won. Is this a new dynasty after one? But I do think it's interesting when it comes to the Oklahoma City Thunder because they're one of the youngest teams in the NBA. And not only that, they have all the ammunition to get better. 13 first-round draft picks over the next 7 years, thanks to the trade of Paul George to the Los Angeles Clippers that also brought them back Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Go ahead, Tinfoil.
So I'm not a big basketball guy except for the WNBA, but
Sorry, did I laugh too hard?
But I think they were the 3rd youngest team to win an NBA championship based on my calculations in history.
Those others I think you've laid out for us are the 76-77 Trailblazers at 24.2 years average. The 79-80 Lakers, 25.7 years of age. Golden State Warriors, 26.4.
There was another one that was those were just kind of like ideas about dynasties and things like that. Those were just some examples. But I think one of the youngest ones was the Lakers before they moved to LA was another one of them. If I recall, I'd have to bring it back up.
Well, of the ones you gave us, the Trailblazers, the Warriors, and the Lakers, 2 of the 3 ended up in a dynasty. The Warriors and the Lakers. The Trailblazers did not. And I would say neither of those had the ammunition that Oklahoma City is sitting on for their future. Now, draft picks are wild cards, and they've been great at it. I mean, Jalen Williams, did they get Jalen Williams in the late first round, or was it the second round? They found Jalen Williams, and he was an absolute stud. But forget the draft picks for a moment. That's ammunition for trade. The Warriors traded for Kevin Durant to extend that dynasty. And the Thunder can do anything. I mean, I don't know that it makes any sense, but who has the most ammunition to trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo? The Thunder. Like, if they wanted to do that, they could add him to a championship team. This team is stocked. I mean, how fun would it be right now to be a Thunder team. You have the present and the future. And that trade of Paul George, I mean, is that now, we'll see how it plays out the next couple of years, but it's on the level of the Herschel Walker trade, which created the Dallas Cowboys dynasty of the 90s. Also having a great coach and having already drafted Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin. But this is bigger. I mean, especially in basketball where it takes fewer. I mean, I don't know. The amount of ammunition that they have. If this is up a dynasty, that trade goes down as the best and worst trades in the history. I mean, Paul George worked out better for the Clippers than Herschel Walker did for the Vikings. But it's so lopsided the other way for the Thunder that you're like, we got an MVP in SGA, and we got all these draft picks. All of these draft picks to turn this thing into a dynasty. I mean, it's good. It's good to be an Oklahoma City Thunder fan. I can't think of a better, like if you're a sports fan, like that doesn't get better than that. You're in every draft. You're in every trade talk. You're in every championship prediction. You're in every playoff series. You're in every MVP conversation. You're literally represented in every cycle of fun that is involved in sports. Usually you have to stink and then get excited about the draft, right? Or you're in the middling ground of playing with the trade machine and waiting for the trade deadline. They're all of the above. They're all of the above, man. That's really fun for sports. I got the NBA draft this week. I'm excited about that, but I haven't thought about my team in the NBA for a couple of months.
But even if no one watches the OKC, you don't care?
What do you mean, ratings?
Yeah, ratings are terrible. They're a small market. I mean, they'll just never break that. But as a fan, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, the Spurs were small market.
Yeah.
And it wasn't great for NBA ratings. But,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a fan, who cares?
That's
I
what
don't
I'm
care.
saying. Yeah.
I don't care if the Texas Rangers, World Series is one of the lower-rated World Series. Who cares? I mean, for me as a fan, as a casual of the league, okay, you can have that conversation, talk about the health of the league. But you think anybody in Oklahoma City cares today about the ratings?
Nope.
No.
Sorry, I'm just a fan of big market teams. That's all. I just don't understand.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are.
Big market underachieving
Oh,
teams.
man. The huge underachieving teams that need to be bought by owners that want to double their money. I had some votes on that in my private life that they all agreed with me. Yeah, man. Play for the big zeros. Buy the Knicks, not the A's. 2-a-days.
Boo.
That was from our Friday edition of Cain on Sports. Best buys in sports after the Lakers sell for $10 billion. Well, your champion and maybe your dynasty and the best experience in sports fandom now all exist in Oklahoma City. Congratulations, Oklahoma. That's going to do it for us today on Cain Country. We hope to download at Spotify and Apple. Make sure you join us again tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern Time for Cain Country.